Hello everyone and welcome to this very special presentation of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. I'm Brandon Adams and I'm very lucky to be sitting here to my left, the great former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards. We got a lot to talk about with Terrence, but also in a couple of minutes here live on the Dog Nation video channels, we will go to North Palm Beach, Florida, the Benjamin School, where four-star defensive back Kaiir Elam will make his college decision, choosing, as he's told us, between his Final Four of the Georgia Bulldogs, Florida, Miami, and then a late edition of the Colorado Buffaloes after Elam took an official visit out there to visit with former Georgia defensive coordinator Mel Tucker. In fact, on your screen right now, you see the Benjamin School. You see what looks to be Elam right there in the middle of the screen. So he's getting ready to make his announcement. We'll be able to bring this to you coming up in just a moment. So you've picked a great time to be on the Dog Nation video channels for Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Before we get into what's going to happen down there on Florida, let me say hello to you, Terrence. And obviously, Terrence, what's going to happen with Elam is a big piece of news, maybe later on for Georgia in the next couple of minutes. But there was big news earlier this morning, too, as Georgia added the five-star wide receiver, George Pickens. Now, you're the all-time leading receiver at UGA. You know what that position's all about. How excited were you about seeing Georgia add a massive, massive piece at the wide receiver position?
I was shocking, to tell you the truth, because, we was all let down with Jaden Hazelwood going to Oklahoma. But this right here kind of covers up that sting just a little bit. George Pickens is a great wide receiver, and I think he's able to do a lot of the things that what we don't have right now on the roster, he's able to do. We'll
take some of your comments and we'll give you a chance to talk to Terrence here in just a moment. But while we wait for Kaiir Elam to make his decision, really probably less than 10 minutes from right now, we'll see Elam making his decision. To me, it seems like kind of a great way to pass the time to take a look at more deeply at the latest edition of Georgia's 2019 class, George Pickens. Terrence, would you be okay if we looked at some of these highlights and give you a chance to talk about some of what you see from Pickens and some of what you think makes him a game-changing wide receiver?
Let's get into his highlights.
Right, let's fire some of these up right now. One of the things that you see from Pickens, and it's going to be on display here, that ability to kind of go up and get the football and use his body.
You know, being a 6'4" receiver to over 200 pounds, you have to win 50-50 catches right now. He has the catch radius to go up 50-50 balls and get them. Right now, he's a big kid, and in the SEC, you got to have run at the catch ability. So being a bigger kid, being more physical, he brings that trait to his game.
How much does it help him, given the fact that Hoover High School in Alabama is one of the, not just the powerhouse programs in the state of Alabama, but really throughout the South and around the country as well? How much does that help with Pickens, knowing that he's been trained up as a part of one of the real major league programs in high school football?
Yes, Hoover produces a lot of great athletes over the years, and he's the next one in line. And being able to play that national ranked schedule that he played at Hoover, his competition, like he's been facing competition all his life. So once he get to the SEC, competition won't be a problem for him because he's faced these same guys in high school.
Last week on Dog Nation Daily, we had a chance to talk to another great receiver at UGA, AJ Green, who's done some tremendous things for the Cincinnati Bengals. And Terrence, one of the things that AJ told us is that Georgia, even with its reliance on the running game and the level of importance the big offensive linemen have gotten, even though this has gotten to be a bit of a power-oriented football team in terms of its identity, AJ told us that shouldn't stop this from still being a destination from wide receivers. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
When it comes to
I definitely agree, because if you think about it, we're such a run-heavy team. That means wide receivers are going to get one-on-one matchups, and if you can't beat one-on-one matchups, then you shouldn't be playing this position. So you're going to get that one-on-one matchup because they have to bring another safety down to the box. So if I was a wide receiver coming out, I would love to go to a school where I know I'm going to get one-on-one coverage each week.
In our YouTube comment section, K9 Blues talking about the size and the strength that Pickens brings to the table. As a wide receiver, how important is that? Because obviously we know about speed and blowing the top off a defense and running past defenders, but in the NFL, that's not always what you do. Some of that is about body position and is about how well you go up and high point the football. What from that have you seen from Pickens?
Pickens uses his body very well. Being 6'4", over 200 pounds, you're not going to be able to run away from everybody. So at some point, you got to use your body position, being able to track balls at his highest points. And I've seen his film; he's been able to do that.
Antonio Jones in our YouTube comment section also talking about those hands, that ability to go up and get the football. And you're a terrific individual coach of the wide receivers. Folks can find you online, and you see some of the work that you've done with guys in the NFL, major college football right now, next generation of high school stars. You've worked with all of them. what would you say about a guy like Pickens, who a little bit like Dominic Blaylock, who I know you know well, comes to Georgia kind of already trained as a wide receiver? This is not just an athlete they're going to turn into a wide receiver. This was a receiver from kind of a young age. How much does that help with the learning curve with all of that?
It definitely helps, and I can speak to that. I was an athlete coming into
That's
high
a good
school.
point.
I played
Really
quarterback,
good point.
so I had to learn a lot of the small nuances of this position. That's something that he's not going to have to learn. So his learning curve is not as big as another guy who may came in, like Mecole Hardman, who's an athlete. So he's only been playing the position for 2 years. Now with George Pickett, he's been just playing this position all his life. So his learning curve is not as big as some other guys.
That is Terrence Edwards, the great former Georgia wide receiver. On your screen, you also see Kaiir Elam, North Palm Beach, Florida, the Benjamin School, where in just a moment Elam will choose among his 4 finalists, Georgia being one of those, and he'll make his announcement live on the Dog Nation video channels coming up in just a little bit. Let me transition away from Pickens for right now and look a little bit more deeply at Elam in this couple of minutes here before Elam gets ready to make his decision, kind of get to where we are right now. First of all, Terrence, I thought there was a very interesting exchange on Twitter over the last 24 hours between Elam, who lets us know about his top 4, and the recent Georgia signee, Tyreek Stevenson, a good friend of Elam's. In fact, let me show you what Stevenson told to Elam on social media. When Elam let it be known that at 1 p.m. he was going to make his announcement, Stevenson told him, and we'll give you a chance to see this for yourself, he said, hey, you got to make sure you do right by you. I love this line from Stevenson. Make sure you're good with yourself before pleasing anybody else. And Elam came back to say, thanks basically for saying those kinds of things. And as a guy like you who made a decision similar to the one that Elam's going to make, he's going to choose from some big time schools. Georgia fans hope he chooses Georgia, but he's got a tough decision that he's facing from his own perspective. Take us back to your recruiting for a moment. And on the day that you announced, the night before you announced, was there a tug of war of pressure between what you wanted to do for yourself and maybe what other people in your family, other programs wanted you to do? In other words, how hard was it for you not just to say yes to Georgia, but say no to teams like Auburn or teams, like Alabama? How tough was it to say no to programs like that?
I understand what he's going through right now, but having his family ties to Florida. I had my family ties coming out to Georgia, so I understand what he's going through. But good thing about my brother Robert Edwards, he never ever tried to sway me to go to one school or other. He let me know that this is your decision. You got to live these 4 years out, and that's what I would say to Elam. Like, you got to live these 4 years out. Family won't be able to live these years out for you, so you got to be happy to where you going. And if the family not happy, they're not living in your shoes. You are.
Now, in the case of your recruitment compared to Elam's, back then we would have been saying, hey, you got to come to the same school your brother's at. You got to follow in those family footsteps. Now, in this case, people like me are going to say to Kaiir Elam, you don't necessarily have to do that. Be your own man and carve your own destiny.
Exactly.
See, those of us who are college football fans, Terrence, we have a way of spinning the story to fit whatever we need for it to in the time.
Exactly. For the young man, I just wish, he just sit back and just take a moment for himself and realize what makes him happy. And if going to Florida makes him happy, go be it. If Georgia makes you happy, you can't please everyone. You have to please yourself first before you please everyone else.
In the screen we showed a moment ago with the top 4 for Elam. Now, part of this is just the way the template's designed, but there are 4 photos. It's Florida, Georgia, and Miami, all with the same size photo on the side. It's the big blown up photo of Elam in a Colorado uniform in the center. Like I said, you can't read too much into that because that's the way that the template to share it works, but it does tie into something that I think has been crucial in the storyline. The fact that Elam was really close with Mel Tucker, Georgia's now departed defensive coordinator, who is the head coach of Colorado, that if Elam chooses Georgia today, and one of the reasons some people assume that he might not, but and you see that on your screen right there, live in North Palm Beach, Florida, with Elam and the Benjamin School, if Elam does choose Georgia today, he's going to have to do so making peace with the fact that the coach that he probably wanted to play for, Mel Tucker, is not going to be at UGA. Put yourself once again in Elam's position. How difficult would that have been for you to do, and how difficult do you presume that is for Elam right now?
I'm very similar situation. When I was coming out in 1998, Coach Donnan was his alma mater, North Carolina State, was in the back. We heard the whispers of he may take his job at his alma mater, and it was big because I wanted to play for Coach Dunn. I understood how he was going to use me, so I really would have to think about my decision. But at the end of the day, we say we have to pick schools and not coaches.
Right.
So I understand that he's not going to go to the situation he thought at first,
sure,
but he has to pick a school that fits him, whatever school that is.
We're only a couple of minutes away from hearing from Kaiir Elam himself about which school he is indeed going to pick. Let me give you a little bit more context, though, on what Terrence Edwards was just talking about. Here's Jeff Sintel from a recent edition of Dog Nation Daily addressing just how critical that relationship with Elam and Tucker was, and how if this ends up being bad news for UGA, the absence of Tucker might be the reason why. Take a listen to this.
I think Mel Tucker was big for Kaiir Elam, especially because he had that NFL experience. His father played 8 and 9 seasons in the NFL. I think this is going to work good for Georgia in terms of Kaiir Elam's not going to make his decision until February. He's going to not even take his officials until January. I think that's good because Georgia will need to have that guy in place certainly well in advance.
So that's Jeff from a while ago when he talked about, you know, the fact that Georgia had a lot of time to make up the ground without having Kaiir Elam. And you know, obviously now we're on that decision day date. When Jeff was on the show on Tuesday, he said, you know, listen, there's obviously still a chance this works out as good news for UGA, but if it does not end up going down, the absence of Tucker could be the reason why, and that's just reality. However, Terrence, the one thing I've also said is this the recruiting battle that Georgia chose to fight. Yep. It chose to fight for Elam without Tucker, and it chose to go into a pretty tough battleground in the state of Florida to pull Elam. So these are the competitive, sort of cutthroat battles that Georgia's choosing to fight right now.
He must be that talented that they're going to go and try to fight for the kid. And I know Kirby very well. I know Kirby, you know, he's the boss man right now. Yeah. So he's going to go in and get the players that he thinks he could get. And I think he thought that, you know, he had a great chance because of his pedigree that he could pull this kid out of the state of Florida.
My producers will tell me when we're going live with Elam here in just a moment. We'll head to North Palm Beach when he's ready to talk. We're still just a little bit away on that. While we're waiting, while we have the great former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards in studio with us for this Before the Hedges Kroger special edition, we'll take some of your comments. I'll also remind you we're heading towards Valentine's Day. When you think about that, think about Kroger. With hundreds of gift cards to choose from, you're sure to find the one that you need at your local Atlanta Kroger store for the loved one on your list this Valentine's season. So check out your local Atlanta Kroger for that. Justin Sisk in our Facebook comment section brought up what I thought was a good point earlier, that because Georgia got George Pickens earlier today, it takes some of the, I don't know that it takes pressure off the Georgia coaching staff one way or another. They want the best roster they can get. But in terms of what would be the excitement level or the disappointment level for fans, the presence of Pickens in the fold for today all of a sudden doesn't make the Elam news quite so high stakes one way or another.
You know, that could be true because, you know, as a receiver and as a former player, I want the best receiver and I want the best DBs available. And I think this kid, Elam here, is a very good defensive back. TJ
Diaz in our Facebook comment section, I'm colorblind, so some of this stuff is lost on me, but noticing that the school colors for the Benjamin School, good bit of red there. I can't tell if that's black or navy blue. Like I said, I'm colorblind. But maybe a little bit of a good sign that it's not quite so orange and blue in that room right now. Now, these are all school colors for the school, but that red is always a welcome sight around announcements like this, right, Terrence?
Oh, most definitely. It looks orange and blue to me, so I don't know, but he would look good in that red and black.
Yeah, he sure would, for sure. And, you know, one of the things you're also seeing a lot in the comment section right now, as we get ready to hear Kaiir Elam's announcement coming up in just a couple of minutes, is for the first time in a while, this is a Georgia-Florida recruiting battle. You know, Florida has been, you know, elite program, obviously, you know, for quite some time, hard years as of late. Georgia has built up a recruiting machine, the likes of which the SEC hasn't seen very much of. But while all this is going on, it seems like sometimes that Georgia and Florida aren't often chasing down the same players. In the case of Kaiir Elam, though, it certainly seems like Georgia and Florida, with all due respect to Tucker in Colorado, it certainly seems like they are the leading candidates here, and a little bit unusual to see Georgia and Florida doing this battle when oftentimes these schools are battling with other rivals for recruits.
It is. Like you say, we haven't seen this in a while. We haven't seen this in a long time, and if Georgia could pull this off, I think it'll be a big win for us.
So Frank Adam Francis, and you must think I'm crazy, Terrence. He says that is orange and blue. Is that really orange and blue? Am I really that colorblind?
It looks orange and blue to me.
Okay, so I guess I really am that colorblind then, so I apologize for that. Nager Yang says, how would you compare Kaiir Elam to Tyreek Stevenson? And, you know, Nager, I don't really know who I would say is the better overall prospect there. But, Terrence, my point when these kinds of things comes up is I believe that Georgia needs them both. I believe that Georgia, when you look at, you know, what Alabama does the wide receiver position, odds are Georgia may have a date with them every December now for quite some time to come. When you think about having to deal with that, you need as many elite defensive backs as you can get. So for me, it's not a Elam is better than Stevenson or Stevenson's better than Elam. Having them both would be best of all.
In this game, if you watch the Chargers play a couple of weeks ago, they had 7 defensive backs on the field majority of the game. So now with the spread offense, the way people are throwing the ball all over the field, now you have to have a lot of good defensive back that can cover and tackle.
Charlie Wisenbaker, while we're waiting on Kaiir Elam, we'll take some more comments here. He asked you your thoughts on James Coley, the transition away from Jim Chaney, who's moving on to Tennessee, to James Coley as offensive coordinator. While we're waiting to hear from Elam, it'd be a good time to hear from you on that. What do you think of the Georgia offense in 2019, and what do you hope to see more of?
I think he's going to be a little bit different. I've had many conversations with Coach Coley about his football knowledge and what he thought we should do, and some of the things that he shared with me, I think Georgia fans would like. It's going to be a little bit different, probably the same terminology that we had, but it's going to be he's going to have his footprint on this offense a little bit different than Coach Chaney.
We're waiting to hear some big news from Kaiir Elam. Let me give you some breaking news as relates to another 4-star defensive back in Florida, Nick Cross, a Florida State commit who visited Penn State this past weekend, took an official visit to Georgia in the late stages before the weekend, was expected to sign this afternoon at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. 24/7 Sports is reporting that Cross now will not sign a letter of intent today, and I'm assuming make no announcement one way or another. Now, I know what we're all thinking. Does that now bode as good news for Georgia? I don't know that Georgia would necessarily be the school to benefit from that, but clearly this is a pretty big loss for Florida State. If an FSU commitment was ready to make it official and now choosing not to, this would appear to be bad news for Florida State there in that regard.
I think so. I think this news probably helps Maryland. I've been following his recruitment a little bit, and I think the Alabama offense coordinator got the head coaching job, did a great job of going to hire DeMatha's head coach as the running back coach, I think is. So he got a relationship with those Maryland, Baltimore kids, and I think this probably bodes well for Maryland.
Yeah, it's quite something how Mike Loxley has already made a pretty big impact there in College Park, and you may see Georgia and Maryland actually battling a little bit this upcoming cycle, just due to the fact that that's become a really talent-rich area. Georgia's looking at a lot of players in that general facility for Marshawn Lloyd, including the elite 2020 running back. So that Beltway area, that Maryland area, for Georgia fans, they may be being forced to pay more attention to Mike Loxley. He is a good recruiter, and he's going to have a geographic advantage in an area that's becoming a bit of a target for Georgia and Alabama, some of these premier programs.
I think so. The Maryland-Baltimore area has always had great talent come out of that area, and now a lot of talented guys in the area seeing what he did for the Alabama program offensively. So why wouldn't you want to play for that guy who just put up those historical numbers at Alabama?
If you're just joining us, that's the former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards, an all-time great. We're lucky to have him here. My name is Brandon Adams. This is a Before the Hedges recruiting special presented by Kroger. You also see on your screen North Palm Beach, Florida, the Benjamin School, where in just a moment Kaiir Elam will make his choice between the Dogs, Florida, Miami, and Colorado. Those are his stated Final Four. UGA fans obviously hoping for good news from one of the top defensive backs in the country. We'll bring that announcement to you live when it comes down. We are waiting for the go-ahead on that. You see Elam still kind of relaxed in the center of your screen. And once we get the all clear, the thumbs up, we'll get ready to rock and roll on that. Roy Appleby in our Facebook comment section while we're waiting says that he thinks that ultimately it's going to be good news for Georgia on Elam. And he cites the presence of Charlton Warren, the Florida defensive backs coach that, speaking of flips, that flipped from that role to Georgia defensive backs coach. And obviously, it was conventional wisdom at the time that when Elam was on campus for his official visit and Georgia hired Charlton Warren there that weekend, that certainly couldn't have hurt Georgia with its chances because Warren had developed a relationship with Elam going back to his time at Florida. We'll wait and see if that was the final nail and that if that does indeed push Georgia over the finish line. But hiring Charlton Warren certainly doesn't seem like it could have hurt with Georgia's chances. And most people would have assumed it would have really helped.
I thought it would have helped as well. So one defensive back coach that you was really close with left, and another one that you was close with that came into the same situation at Georgia. So it can only help the situation if we don't get him or not. I think that was one of the best hires Kirby had.
Justin Sutherland says rumors are Cross is going to hold off on his decision yet. Justin, we were just talking about that, and Terrence said watch out for Maryland on that due to a relationship that he has. Remember, he's played his high school ball there in DeMatha, so pay close attention to that. Roderick Henderson also mentioning Brad Seither. Really just a few minutes after. Okay, we're going to go live. Let's go live to there right now. Here is Kaiir Elam. So you see what looked to be a little bit of a troll job there from Kaiir Elam. Looked like the Georgia hat may have come out first, and then the Florida hat does come on. Kaiir Elam has chosen the Florida Gators, sticking with the family ties here. A disappointing loss for Georgia, obscuring only slightly for a brief moment the big win earlier with getting the 5-star wide receiver George Pickens. But if I saw that video correctly, it did look like Elam chose to have a little fun at Georgia's expense there with the Georgia hat just briefly. So Terrence, Georgia misses out on Elam, and we'll find out what kind of college career he goes on to work with there at the University of Florida.
Oh, even though he didn't pick the university that I root for, he's a talented young man, and I wish him well, and we'll see him at the World Larger Cocktail.
Yeah, absolutely. Antoine Middleton says the same thing. Congrats to Elam, wish him well. And you know, Terrence, you understand this as a former player and a guy that still works with so many great players of this generation, that college decisions are tough, and I love the Georgia-Florida rivalry, but I'm not looking to hate on a kid for making a decision that I would have wished he hadn't made. I don't mind hating Florida, and I enjoy doing that, but I'm not going to hate on Elam for making the decision he thought was best for him.
This is a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid make a decision to go play college football and get an education, and we can't be mad at a decision that he made. Wish him well, and we'll see him down the road. Jen
Godsey saw that one coming, and I think there was a lot of chatter about that over the last couple of days, that it seemed like Elam was trending in that direction when it comes to the University of Florida. That's indeed what he does. I will be curious to find out. It looks like he's speaking. I'll be curious to find out how close it really was with Georgia and Florida. That's one of those things you'll probably look to see and hear a lot about. We'll try to catch up with Jeff Sintel on this and see if he can give us a moment of his time just to react to this. Let me change the subject here just for a moment, though, because we're now only a few minutes away from Brett Seither, the tight end, getting ready to make his choice. This is the next one in line for UGA, a chance to pick up, speaking of that Maryland area, another tight end from that part of the country. What can you tell us about Brett Seither? He's only a couple of minutes away from making his decision.
I just watched this film recently once we made an offering and other schools are offering, and I can tell you this, he's different than any other tight end that we have on our roster right now. He's 6'5", 235 pounds, but he moves like a small wide receiver, and that's something that in today's game that we're going to, like a Melvin Ingram, and from Ole Miss that plays with the Giants. You got these tight ends now. Irv Smith from Alabama last year was one of those guys that run routes like a receiver and move like a receiver. And this guy here is definitely one of those guys I think it can impact Georgia recruiting.
Yeah, you take a look at his film right there, you see some of the things that he's able to do. And really, you talk about that kind of difference-making tight end, that more athletic tight end. It's really part of what could be a trend for Georgia moving forward. You think about the class of 2020 with the in-state prospect, Reed Gilbert. Now, Gilbert's a next-level athlete. There aren't many people who compare athletically with him, with all due respect to Seither, but these unique tight ends that do bring some of that athleticism to the table, Georgia could start something with Seither that could continue in a big way in the class of 2020 if they're able to bring in a Reed Gilbert.
I train Eric, so I understand what type of athlete
he is. I know you love what Eric brings to the table.
So, I mean, a guy that's that physical gift, I mean, he's a must-get for the Bulldog when his time has come. But I really love this kid right here, and I think you'll see more opportunities for the tight end in Coach Kohler's offense.
So why don't we do this here for a moment? Let's take a pause. Let's find out what Brett Seither is going to do. I was going to try to get Jeff Sintel on the phone. We'll push back on that and try to catch up with Jeff coming up for Before the Hedges. That's still coming up at its normal time, live, 3 p.m. Eastern time today. But let's see if we can figure out what Brett Seither is going to do. And who knows? You never know when we might pop back up again on the Dog Nation video channels in just a moment. So for now, let me recap the news as we know it. The 4-star defensive back Kaiir Elam has chosen the University of Florida. Next up is Brett Seither, and I know that you'll look forward to hearing a lot of analysis from Terrence Edwards about what all this 2019 signing class brings to the table for the Georgia Bulldogs. Terrence, it's great to have you in studio today.
Oh, thank you.
We got more video stuff coming up, including Before the Hedges later on today. We'll see you then. Thanks for being on this special presentation of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger.